Welcome to the FPL USA Press Play Podcast. This is our second preseason positional preview episode where the three hosts will dive deep into looking at the midfielder position. And we are spoiled for choice with high ceilings of point potential. So I am Bucks, one of your three hosts. I'm joined as always by my two lovely co-hosts. I got Brian and Black Wolf. Lads, say hello.
What's good? Welcome back to another episode, baby. It feels so good to be back in the swing of things. Can't wait to watch some real football. I know Bucks has been tracking some preseason action, and these first couple of friendlies I could not give a fuck about. It's just some bad football out there. You're seeing 45-minute cameos for every single player, their godson, their godson's godson. It's too much of this preseason football. I'm ready for the real thing, and that would mean we'd be one step closer to game week 1 in our FPL sides. Dan, how you doing after my rant of an intro?
Well, I like preseason football a lot better than you do. I kind of enjoy it, seeing how the teams are shaping up. I always get my hopes up that Wolves are going to have a great season, and then they get an injury in preseason, and I get all sad again. We heard the news that Cunha pulled his hamstring in the last game, so I'm a little down about that right now.
Wait
Believe
a
it.
second. I did not hear this. Oh my goodness, Dan. It's the second hamstring injury in the last 5 months.
I mean, it looks like it's not that bad, so he should be okay for the start of the season, but he's going to miss the rest of preseason. So
That's what Bucks and I said about Reece James 4 years ago, and here we are.
well, that guy's made of glass, so
Oh, that's a cheap shot, Dan. You should be more sensitive coming off the IR yourself. And we hope Cunha has a full and complete recovery, just like we're hoping for you and all of the Wolves supporters. We have love in our hearts for the lads in yellow. They're not direct rivals of our Chelsea Blues. With that, I think let's transition. We got a lot to cover on this episode. But first, we just want to highlight the free podcast mini league we are running. Lads, can you share the info for that?
Absolutely. So we're hoping to crack over 500 managers in our mini league this season. Last season, we had a great run in, and the winner, Sultan Saeed, won a kit. We are working on getting that out to him. Got to send that abroad. He's a Manchester United fan. I think that's also been part of the delay as well. We don't like buying Man U jerseys around here, but you can join our free to enter Press Play Pod Premiership, our free global league. The code is T88F87. And you can also find that pinned on our X account/Twitter account. So check us out. Make sure you follow us on X as well. To win the actual kit, you have to be following us on X by the end of the season as well.
Awesome. Let's transition and dive in to the midfielders. And as opposed to the forwards where we saw virtue in starting in the bargain bin, let's start in the premium section. Let's go straight to the high-end items in the back of the shop behind lock and key, starting with the Egyptian king himself. He rules over the court and he rules over the city of Liverpool. And that's Mo Salah, who comes in at 12.5 million. Will he be in both your game week 1 teams?
I find it funny because at the end of last season, I think a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's the end of Salah. This is the last time I'm going to have him in my team." And now he's like the third highest owned asset currently in the game. And, I'll be surprised if he's not in my team. The guy's had a haircut. You know what happens when players have haircuts? It changes them. And he's absolutely ripped. Have you seen him lately? The guy is absolutely ripped.
The guy likes taking his shirt off,
He
right?
does.
Just like you like taking your hat off, Dan, blinding the people.
The guy's got like a 10-pack. I don't know how he does it. It's ridiculous. But he's going to have a great start to the season, I feel. It remains to be seen how the new manager lines them up together once we get people like Diaz back and Jota back. But you have to think that Salah's going to start the games, and even if he plays out wide, I think he's still a great asset. He will still be on penalties most likely. So yeah, he'll be in my team probably.
Mo Salah and Liverpool have the fixtures to open the season, and that's what makes it really tricky. I feel like you have to have at least one Liverpool asset to start the season because you're going to have Ipswich away, Brentford at home, Manchester United away. They love to score goals versus Man U. NFO at home and Bournemouth at home, followed by Wolves away and Crystal Palace away. So it's a great run to open the season. No other teams in the top four to face. So Mo Salah 12.5, I think was a fair price. I love that he's 2.5 million less than Holland, and it gives you a lot of options as well if you're going to downgrade into one of the other premium midfielders that we're all looking at as well.
Yeah, he scored 18 goals with 12 assists from 26 starts last season, but the vibes were way off. So I know it felt worse than that when you looked at it from a game in and game out perspective. So I think he's going on this amazing run. He has 7 straight seasons with 26 goal involvements or more. And, despite only having 211 FPL points last season, I think he's one of the only players where he could break 200 FPL points and you'd still be kind of clutching your pearls about the output you got from a player like him.
Yeah, the vibes were off last season, especially after he had that fucking dust up with Klopp on the sideline when they were losing and he didn't start that match. He has lost a step when you're looking at his ability to dribble past defenders, but he still puts a lot of threat onto the back line and is generally, I thought, a very creative player last year. And something that I do like about Salah heading into this year with the rule changes in FPL with the bonus system, he's going to get points for not only shots on target, but when he gets fouled. And so I think that will really help him because last 2 seasons, I feel like he's consistently been on like 1 bonus point. And when you're going to captain somebody, you really want your premium to capture all 3 bonus points. So I feel like if Liverpool can click from the beginning with their wingers and the rest of their squad in this new system under Mr. Slotman, then he's a great pick.
We should also add that Salah's record in game week 1 is outstanding. So he plays newly promoted side Ipswich. And I think the potential is right there in front of our faces for a massive captaincy haul in game week 1, targeting a team that's about to step up in difficulty against one of the elite sides in the Premier League from the last couple of years. And Salah is one of the best players in the league, let alone for FPL. So I think the stars are aligning here for a Salah massive haul to get the season started. Anything else you want to add about
I'm
Mo,
gonna take
Danny?
I'm gonna take the under on that game week 1. I feel like I see him under 8 points versus Ipswich away. I'm really backing the promoted team being jacked up for that opener and maybe some rust from the Liverpool side. So I will take the under on 8 points.
Wow, Brian, I like that spicy and bold contrarian take. That's very Bucks-esque of you. Dan, where are you on this debate?
Well, I think he's going to see a new lease of life, this guy. I just have a feeling he's going to turn it back on and be the player he was a few seasons ago. It went kind of stale for him at the end of Klopp's tenure. But I think part of that was all the rumours of him leaving. I think he fell out with Klopp. His relationship didn't seem to be as good as it was before. And I really do believe in this expected hairdo. So I'm gonna say he's gonna get over 8 points that first game.
All right, we'll bet
I think he's
we'll
comfortably
bet a
double
friendly
digits.
friendly beer
I
on
think
that.
11 plus is my Bucks 2 cents on Mo Salah. The new aerodynamic dew will come good for the Egyptian king.
I mean, are you guys not worried about the unrest in this team right now? I mean, they're not going to have any of their full starting 11 until the Sevilla matchup, which is 1 week before the league kicks off. So I'm just a little curious there. We're going to have a lot of people on international duty coming back at weird times, not getting a full training camp with the new coach. I think there's just a few, especially if you're looking for a Liverpool double up of, say, Mo and Trent. I just think it's a bit risky to start the season. I want to see them prove it and under this new manager.
I'm not too bothered. I think the disparity in skill and the talent across the squads is just absolutely immense. And I think Liverpool's B team probably has enough to beat Ipswich. And all those guys that were on international duty were getting regular minutes, so they are fit. And they will be coming back to Merseyside and in training at Liverpool's campus. So I have no worries about their abilities to start hot and take advantage of this amazing fixture run that they have in the beginning of the season.
All right, let's move to the next bracket, which I just absolutely adore. I'm so happy that FPL Towers gave us a number of assets to choose from the 9.5 million pound bracket to 10.5 million pounds. So, Dan, let's start off with the most expensive man here. Cole Mother Bleepin Palmer, Chelsea Blue legend in the making. Do you think he warranted the highest price rise of all time, going from a mere 5 million, 5.5 last season, all the way up to 10.5?
I mean, based on his season last season, he was the top scoring asset in the entire game. He got 22 goals, 13 assists for a total of 244 points, which was just insane. However, I do think they've gone a little too pricey for him because, they have their new manager now. They have players like Nkunku back. I don't know. I'm kind of cold on Cold Palmer right now. He could prove me wrong for sure,
Oh,
especially when the
wow.
fixtures
Bundle
turn.
up,
But
baby.
I don't know. Something about me is telling me he's not going to have the season he did last season. And I could very well be completely wrong. And I'll have to change my team around to get him in.
I want to just throw in the mixer that he missed 7 games last season. So not only was he the highest scoring player in the FPL game, but he did it in a kind of shortened season because he wasn't fully fit coming from City. And then he needed the trust of the manager being so young. And yet he still ended up with the most total goal involvements, even more than Holland. So I think Cole Palmer is just a really special player. I'm struggling to fit him in for game week 1, but I see a very realistic scenario where I am moving Salah to Cole Palmer a couple game weeks into the season. And the fact that he's on penalties, he's clearly the talisman that the Chelsea project will be built around for the next couple years. And right now he's over 50% owned. So kind of not having him is slightly risky going into game week 1 if he bangs. But again, he is playing against Manchester City, though he did haul against them in the matchups last season with a penalty and eavesdropping on his former teammates, which I thought was hilarious. So there's a lot to love about one Cole Palmer.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to convince myself that he's not as good of an asset as he is because I also can't fit him into my team right now. I mean, looking at his fixtures, game week 2 to game week 7, they're amazing. And like you said, he's 50% owned. If he does anything in that run, your rank's going to take a massive dive straight away. So, once again, I think I'm agreeing with you, Bucks. I think Salah
Stop it.
to. I
Stop
know,
it.
I don't like it. Salah to Palmer kind of makes sense, especially if you see that Salah isn't the asset we think he's going to be.
Look, if Palmer even has a dip in production in fantasy points of 20%, that's still going to put him around 200 points. And that's a great result, I think, because 200 points is kind of the benchmark we go for the top 5 midfielders in the game. And I just see him being in that place again. He's going to find ways to impact the game, whether it's in the open play, trailing, getting those shots inside the box, outside the box. He's just the pace at which he sees the game. He's not a particularly quick or fast guy, but his skill level and his understanding and footwork is just top notch. And I
And
still,
confidence.
I still can't believe we got this guy late off of City. It's fucking crazy, Bucks. I mean, we could have had, and not to slag Anthony Gordon, but like we had our eyes all over Anthony Gordon that summer earlier in the window, and to end up with this guy who is going to be hopefully a Chelsea legend for the next 5+ seasons while he's at the bridge it's just awesome. Can't wait to watch him this season.
Amen to that. And I wonder if this is a crazy take, but is he ready to take over from Mo Salah? I know we were mentioning at the intro with the most premium player that he's pretty obviously lost a half step. Maybe he hasn't lost a full step. He's still an elite winger, probably among the best right wingers in the world. But is Cole Palmer ready to take the mantle from Salah as the best midfielder for FPL, let alone in the Premier League?
You gotta have at least 2 seasons of 200+ points, I think, to be thinking about taking the mantle. I mean, when you look at and that goes for Foden as well, who's in this price bracket. Like he had an explosive season last year. I want to see them do it in back-to-back seasons, just so that it wasn't only a hot run of form and a lot of penalties. I just want to see another full season before we take that crown off of the Egyptian king's head.
All fair. Let's go to the 10 million price bracket, 0.5 million less than Cole Palmer. We have Saka and Heung-min Sung. Where do we want to start, guys?
I'm going to take Sonny Boy first, and then we'll give Saka to Dan to break down. I'm very surprised at the amount of teams that don't have Son in their side. Obviously, there's a lot to unfold still for Tottenham in the transfer window, and I think that'll put a big effect on managers' minds when they're looking at possibly bringing Son in. But if there's a world where Richarlison would leave and then Son's going to play up top, then we're talking. We look at Son last year, he outscored Mo Salah over 200 points once again. So many seasons of over 10 plus goals in the league. I do think he's also lost a step from where he was 2 seasons ago, but I expect him, especially if he stays on pens, to replicate that 200 point mark again. So 17 goals, 10 assists last season. I think that we saw Ange Ball fizzle out a little bit. So if they can find ways to adapt in the mid to late season and not struggle like they did last year, then he should be on for another 15 goals and 10 assists. Agree or disagree, Dan?
I agree. I mean, looking at all of these players now, it's making me realize the Haaland and Salah combination for game week 1 is very risky because you can't get most of these players along with them. And now I'm actually seeing the stats on paper. I'm thinking, is that a big risk to go without these guys? I mean, we can talk about Saka as well. He got 16 goals and 12 assists in 35 starts for Arsenal last season. I think Arsenal are going to be another elite team again this season. They've improved their squad, particularly in defence. More importantly to me, they haven't signed a right winger, as far as I'm aware. So Saka is still going to play every single minute that he's fit. He's going to be on penalties still. So he's a great asset again. And unlike Son and Salah, who might be slowing down a little bit, Saka is still very, very young. He's still going to get better and better. So he's a very good asset. However, we're going to talk in a little while about the 8.5 million assets because Odegaard is 1.5 million cheaper than Saka. And I think that's a very good price to put him as because it makes you make a decision there on those two.
Yeah, and I think worth mentioning for both Son and Saka is their opening fixtures aren't ideal. I think clearly Salah and Palmer have better runs for the jump. I mean, Saka plays against Villa, Spurs, and Manchester City all in the first 5 game weeks. And Son plays Newcastle away and then hosts Arsenal for the North London Derby at home in game weeks 3 and 4.
Are those bad fixtures though? I mean, I think
they're not as good as playing against the newly promoted teams, despite your love
well,
of
of course. But I think for Son, especially on the counterattack in an open match, I mean, we always see goals in the North London Derby, and then on top of that, like Newcastle, Trips might leave. They got Botman out. Their defense is going to be okay, but I don't think it's going to be a world beater even at home. Like they want to play 3-2 types of matches, I think, at Newcastle.
I just want to shout out a great piece of content that I saw on X from FPL Goat, who's under the handle at FPL Goat 7. And he describes the kind of tinker-tastic nature of rotating between the 4 premiums we just discussed and the game weeks to jump in for a good run and then how to rotate and maximize the opposition that they're going against for the most cupcake of fixture runs. So I really like the idea of going from Salah maybe down to Cole, then eventually jumping on to Son, then to Saka, and kind of getting your hands dirty with a little bit of musical chairs between these premium options.
All right, let's go to the 2 other players in the premium bracket, which are the Manchester City midfielders. We're talking about Philip Foden and KDB. So Foden gets a big price rise after his Player of the Year season. 19 goals and 8 assists for 230 points, second highest total for midfield, and still sees a price tag which is below that of Son, Saka, and Palmer. I actually don't mind this price tag given that he's not going to be on pens, where the three guys who are priced zero point 0.5 to 1 million higher than him all have pens. So I do like the price point for Foden. It'll be interesting to see when there's a great run for City if we'll be doubled up like we were for a number of game weeks last season with the big man Holland plus little Phil. So tricky to start him in game week 1 though. I think he's going to be very overlooked. So anyone who goes Nolland and just grabs Foden instead, those will be interesting to see if variance, especially in the first kind of 4 fixtures, swings that way. If Foden gets a hat trick and you see a couple of blanks out of Holland, and those players could be really rocketing up the ranks. So very interesting case, but I don't see him being highly owned to start the season, right, Bucks?
Well, he's 33% owned right now, so the community is disagreeing with you
Oh
with
wow.
their
Okay.
drafts.
Yeah, I mean, still early days in drafting. I don't see a lot of teams across X and across some of the Discord communities that I'm in that have him penciled in, but obviously he's an English boy and he's going to be highly owned.
Well, I think that's because there's been a lot of rumors about that he's going to miss the Community Shield. He's still away traveling because of the Euros. So, that there's rumors among Manchester City fans that he might be eased into the season a little bit for the first few games, play the likes of Grealish, who's had a full summer rest, and then ease Foden back in. So I think that's putting off people who are the more engaged managers and the more casual managers who just look at his points total and how good of a player he is and just immediately put him in their game week 1 draft. I love him. I love his price, but I don't think I'm going to be getting him until he's getting regular stats.
Totally agreed. He's coming off a lot of regular football. He took on a lot of minutes at the Euros, didn't make much of an impact, and he also was playing pretty much every minute down the stretch run for Manchester City. So Lad deserves a break. He also, I think, had another kid. Congrats to him and his family. He's been busy on and off the pitch. Let's just say that for the under 25-year-old Manchester lad. Let's talk about the other side of the age spectrum, and that's Kevin De Bruyne. He also comes in at 9.5. My hot take is this is too expensive. It would have been really interesting had he come in at 9 or 8.5 million. The official FPL game would have really made you make a decision on Foden versus KDB and the upside of maybe going with the older magician in midfield as the cheaper option because he's less of a goal threat and more of a creative talisman, just feeding Holland over and over again. And he struggles for fitness. So I think KDB 9.5 million, pretty much not on the menu, in my opinion. What say you guys?
Not to mention, we're going to see Manchester City try and crack their streak of losing in Champions League. So you're going to see Pep probably prioritize some of those big games mid-season that City will have to have multiple games each week. So I see him playing maybe 2,200 minutes in the Premier League. That's factoring in like a
Less.
probably 6 week injury absence. So I definitely worry about Kev. In my notes for at their last season, I have don't buy Kevin De Bruyne again. And it was very sad for me to write because I just recently purchased his kit because I was fearful that he was heading to Saudi. So he's been one of my favorite players in FPL for the last 9 years. So it's really sad to see him on kind of these later stages of his career. But 9.5, no chance in hell. You go Foden all day, every day, just for the explosive goal totals.
Yeah, the thing about Kevin De Bruyne is you have to get him at the right time. We've seen that for the past 2 seasons. He will go most of the season not really doing anything, being injured, getting rests, and then all of a sudden he'll have this little period where he just goes on a mad one and gets so many points. And I think that'll be the same this season. He's not a good asset for me in the long term, and certainly not for the beginning of the season.
All right, that's a great place to end. Let's leave the premium bracket in our rear view mirror. And let's fast forward. I'm titling this group the midfielders who matter because this is really where we hit the brass tacks and
Like
it
that.
starts
Like
getting,
that.
yeah, it gets messy here because you really want to have at least one player from this 8.5 to 7 million bracket. And ideally, if you're ambitious. Maybe you could squeeze two guys in. And that starts with the Manchester United talisman in the middle, the rat face fuck himself, Bruno Fernandes, 8.5 million. He's not my fave. Can you tell?
Yeah, you weren't playing FPL when he burst onto the scene, and he
I
was
was, I was. He was just getting
was that
penalty
was that
after
your first
penalty.
was that your
Yeah, that
first
was my
year?
first season.
Yeah, I mean he
I
had
had a
what
couple of those hauls.
250 points that season. It was insane. Yeah, I mean Bruno at 8.5. I guess the pint half full approach would be: do we think that the season that Manchester United had last year was a season from hell? Do we think that Højlund is going to take another step in his second season in the Premier League and be that striker that they purchased him to be? Do we think that maybe Casemiro being out of the side and purchasing a DM plus maybe solidifying their defense actually allows Bruno to press up higher in the pitch instead of tracking back so much, a la Harry Kane in the England side during the Euros? I mean, these are the questions that we have for Bruno in Manchester United. He's going to probably have 5 to 6 pens. That's going to be easy. He creates almost more chances than anybody in the Premier League, but the finishing was woeful. Obviously, Garnacho is a young lad, and he was had a couple good games, but also missed some big chances. And then Rashford, I think if Rashford can be clicking again, then we could see Bruno on a 200-point season at 8.5. But I'm just not sure if that character is going to come out.
Yeah, there's too many questions that need answering for me before I consider Bruno. I agree with what you said. The likes of Rashford, if he returns to his best and starts banging in all those goals again, if Bruno is played in the position he's actually good at, where he can create all of these chances, then I think he's a very, very, very good asset at 8.5 million. I highly suspect he'll be in my team at some point this season. I just don't know when, and I don't think it will be in game week 1.
To give the broad spectrum of perspectives here, I know that the analytics community and the solvers absolutely have a love affair with Bruno Fernandes, as I believe he created the most chances and big chances in the Premier League last season. So, assuming Manchester United level up like Ineos thinks they're going to on the field going into next season, I mean, there will be a lot more points on a consistent basis for Bruno because he's at the center of everything for the Reds. So, I think 8.5, he's priced right. There's just enough uncertainty to make it so he's not an obvious slam dunk of a pick at that price. Next up, we got Odegaard, Martin from Norway. Martin from Norway on Hinge, I believe. He's swiping in at 8.5 million. He got 8 goals and 11 assists. I'm glad you guys like that. And 186 points in 35 starts for the second place side, Arsenal. It was a dream season. He did take a penalty or two. Question is whether it's enough of a discount to Saka, who we expect to be on penalties, and a little more of a talisman with 1.5 million difference between Martin and Bukayo. Brian, I know you were talking a lot about Arsenal and how they are on your radar. Is Odegaard going to make the cut?
I mean, it's interesting when you look at season over season. Last year, 8 goals, 11 assists. The season before that, it was reversed, 15 goals and 8 assists. So, I think he's probably like
Great shout.
he's like a 12 and 12 player. So maybe he underperformed on his goal tally last season. Um, I mean, he's still a young player. He's growing into himself. I think it's just an interesting price point between Kai Havertz, who had 13 goals and 10 assists last season, and 180 points. Again, he was playing out of position as kind of that number 9, but was classified as a midfielder last season. So I think these are factors that you're probably comparing the two of those. I don't think you go for Odegaard as a coverage pick for Saka. I think you have to look at it as individual picks. Because I just think if like when you own Odegaard, you want to have him for the whole season because he's going to trickle along. He's going to have a lot of games where he might get 7 or 8 points, whereas we've seen a little bit more explosivity from Kai, and same goes for Saka. So I think it's an interesting price point for sure. But in my game week 1 side, man, Arsenal is just super tricky to try and figure out how you fit them into your side. Like I know you haven't done any drafts, Dan, but Bucks, like, do you have any Arsenal players in your opening game week 1 squad right now?
No, I'm skipping them from the start. And I got pretty lucky last season. I think that contributed to my overall good season, where I was very fortunate to time going on to Arsenal at the right moments. I got onto Saka when he really started hauling double-digit returns, and I was off him for about 12 or so game weeks when he wasn't really firing. And I was able to kind of cover him with Bowen and other lads that were contributing to my team. So 8.5 million for Odegaard, I think is fair. I guess the question is if the new bonus point rules are going to hurt him, because he's not really a player that takes a ton of shots, and his fouls aren't really, leading to attacking chances. So
Yeah, but I
whereas I
think
think
the
Salah,
bonus points for fouls, it doesn't matter where it is
oh,
in the
interesting.
pitch. Like so, like for example,
Well, I think Saka
Gabriel.
would benefit more, right? He gets fouled.
Right, right. But there are a lot of times where Odegaard is pivoting the ball up the field and getting smashed on. And so like those fouls count the same as if you were going down the flank like Saka is and then getting taken down. So just pointing that
That's a
out.
good point. That's a good point. I feel like anytime he scored a shot from outside the box, he was pretty much automatically on three bonus. So it was like if KDB got any return, he was automatically on three bonus. And I think the rule changes will hurt players of that nature. I'm interested to bring Dan into this conversation. Dan, you pro or con the big O?
I'm pro Odegaard. I think he's a great asset. Again, not for the start of the season, but I think he's a good alternative to Saka. Although Brian makes a good point that Odegaard's the kind of player who you want for the long term, not to catch the horse. He tends to just tick along nicely. But for a piece of that Arsenal midfield, a player who's completely nailed and the captain in that team, I think he's a great shout. Because 1.5 million is a lot of money that lets you upgrade elsewhere.
Absolutely. And I think it's just going to be a revitalized season from Odegaard. Maybe he gets a couple more goals. Like if he gets 4 more goals this season and still gets a dozen assists, that's going to put him in really high regard. And he's coming off of an off season where he played no football. So he's fully rested, just like the pros that we've been talking about. Holland getting that full rest. He's going to be fresh as a daisy to start the season.
Great shout. Let's jump
Ne-
next to the Reds of Liverpool. They have two wingers on the menu in Jota and Luis Diaz coming in at 7.5 million each. I think both of them might be stayaways to start the season out. I mean, Jota coming off injury, Luis Diaz not yet training with the squad. I would much rather just pay the premium and get a known quantity in Salah, who's with the team, who's learning the system, than either of these guys for a punt. You guys agree? You
I
on the
agree.
same wavelength or what?
Yeah, I'm going to lump two more players into that statement as well. I'm going to lump in Martinelli and Trossard from Arsenal. I think Jota, Luis Diaz,
7 million.
Martinelli,
I like that.
Trossard, all four of those guys, they just are not guaranteed starts. If they do start, they're going to come off around the 60th minute or so, usually. So for the price they are, when you can get players who are nailed for just £1 million more, I just think they're not interesting. So they're stayaways for me. Of course, there's an injury where they get more minutes, then changes things.
I'm definitely having my eyes on Jota for my watch list as the season progresses. I think he's by far the best finisher between Darwin and Gakpo and himself. And there are times that he might play the false nine potentially in that Liverpool side. But to start the season, it's a clear stay away. And like Diaz played really well for Colombia in the Copa, but looking at his totals from last year, very underwhelming. 8 goals, 7 assists. This is pretty shitty. I mean, he played 2,700 minutes, 2,600 minutes. He was under his XG by 4. And although he looks really good on the pitch, his final actions just nowhere near as ruthless and clinical as somebody like Sadio Mane, who we've seen on the left with the Liverpool side. So he can still grow into his role, but there's just too
Yeah.
many horses for courses with
Diaz
this
is a
Liverpool
blue
team.
baller. Diaz is a blue baller for sure. He's all fat, no poo poo. He just absolutely does these amazing runs. He takes these really good shots and then
Did you
misses
just
every
say
single time.
did you just say poo poo on the pod?
I did.
Oh my goodness.
I
You
did.
you and
Jesus,
you
you're
and
not
your
even a
miss
dad.
I'm the classy Englishman of this podcast.
Yeah.
Keeping it
Are you
PG.
Are you baby crazy with your wifey or what's going on here? Poo poo.
Yeah, goo goo gaga for old
Wow.
Dano over there. Golly.
Disco Dan's getting it on.
It's the bald head. It does things to me.
Agree with you though. I want to just shout out that I think that Luis Diaz is such an exciting player when you're watching him, but he's underwhelming for FPL. He's actually
Yeah.
a quirky reverse of most players who are, they're like super boring when you watch them, but they're just kind of easily getting FPL points like a Pascal Gross kind of lad. And I think we can leave that conversation there. I agree with you, Dan. I think all four of those guys are stayaways. If I had to pick one, I think Jota would be the upside chasing move, but I think there's better players that we're going to talk about just now, which is Anthony Gordon at 7.5 million for Newcastle. The fixtures are there, the form playing at home is absolutely there, and I think it's not crazy that a Newcastle double up is the way forward to start the season, and I will probably be there on Gordon with Isak and just trying to get massive hauls for the first 3 game weeks at minimum. What say you guys?
Yeah, I will probably be there too on the double up. I was actually looking at the midfielders, and I think if I had to drop one of them to try and fund a more premium defender, it might be Gordon. However, they have great fixtures to start with. But like you said, he's an elite asset at home. He's pretty much guaranteed to return when he plays at home. In their first, 5 fixtures, they actually only have 2 home games. The other 3 are away. So I'm looking at that as a way to perhaps tell myself that he isn't essential for the beginning. But again, his ownership is so high. He plays for a Newcastle team. He was pretty much rested for the Euros. He didn't get hardly any minutes for England, so I'm not worried about his fitness. Plus, we saw that he could break his leg last season and play the next game.
Yeah, be
without a
fine
shoe.
5 minutes later. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Eddie Howe, the lying fuck.
So I think he's a great asset, but I do think if you are looking to save some funds, I don't mind teams without him in. Let's just say that.
Well, just to jump on the other shoulder for you, Dan, and I'll put my horns on right now. Anthony Gordon had the same amount of returns that Foden did last year, and Foden was the player of the year. So they both had 27 returns last season. And there's potential that if Trippier leaves, that the bag of avenues for Gordon to get points might increase. He might be on set pieces and he might be taking more of the creative
It's a
role
good
from
point.
deep. So I think Gordon is almost a must. We're going to talk about some other
A
midfielders that I think
must.
are
A must. Wow.
that
That's strong.
Southampton match. I think there's a non 0% chance that he could get 13 points in that opening match. And at 7.5 million, I just think he's better value, in my opinion, than Odegaard at 8.5 million. So he doesn't have penalties, and neither does Odegaard. But I just think that he's more integral to the final action than Odegaard is to, and he's more involved more of the time, right? Arsenal, the problem is they spread around those returns, and Gordon and Isak pretty much know they're going to be involved in almost every goal scoring opportunity.
All right, next up, let's have some banter about a few of these other
Brian,
7.5.
did I just break your brain?
No, I'm staring at some charts that I really am excited to talk about when we jump to James Madison, who is one of my boys out there. He had a really
Oh,
rough
yuck.
season, had a really rough season last year, but fighting off those injuries, not making the England Euro squad, definitely has a chip on his shoulder. And I think one thing I do want to call out in 2,100 minutes, had 15 returns, only 4 goals, 11 assists. We want those goals to be a bit higher. But when we're looking at the changes for BPS, he was one of the biggest winners when we're looking at attacking outfield players because he drew a whopping 74 fouls in his limited minutes. And then in addition to that, some of the other bonus he had with the new rule changes, he'll have about a 25% increase in his BPS. So somebody at 7.5 and actually goes right in line with Anthony Gordon, who we just talked about. Gordon would have seen a 22% increase in his bonus points due to the new rule changes. So these are things that, again, in the margins, but could be very interesting as we see the new bonus system unfold for some of these mid-price players that we're really trying to pick between one of 3 guys.
We're gonna have to start calling you Old McDonald with all the nuggets you're bringing to the party here, Brian. I love those stats you're dropping right here. Dan, you a Madison truther? I am absolutely not on Ashley or James Madison.
No, I'm not on James Madison. I mean, he's clearly a great player, but I just can't justify putting him in my squad when he's at the same price as the likes of Gordon, when he's more expensive than the player we're going to talk about next, Eze. Even Bowen, I think, is a better asset than Madison because he plays high up the field for West Ham. He does all the good things for West Ham. So I need to see more from Madison before I consider him.
I was just going to pivot to Bowen. Obviously, a little bit of a mixed fixture bag to start the season, playing home versus Villa, away versus Palace, home versus City, away versus Fulham, and home versus Chelsea in the first five. So not great, but this guy netted 16 goals last season. A really, really positive season for Bowen once again. He was away with England on Euros, but didn't play too many minutes there. He's been really fit the last 3 seasons. He's played 3,000 minutes in each of his last 3 seasons, and I expect that to continue. Hopefully him and Kudus can develop even more rapport on the pitch, and they're just missing one other player, right? Like they need a striker that can help stretch the field and allow Bowen to run into those channels because he has shown that he's a really good finisher and just a poacher. Like he's just a smart poacher getting those rebound goals and getting in the right positions, but would love to see West Ham nail down another striker to maybe alleviate some of the double teams he saw.
Dan, I could have sworn you would have been all about the Rod of Jars. He was so good to you in the middle of last season.
He was.
And I know your WAG FPL
Oh,
fella.
that fucking, oh my God, the 21 point
The
hat
20
trick
pointer.
performance.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dan was there for it.
Yeah, I got 5 goals from Douglas Luiz and Jared Bowen that game week when they were both below 10% owned. So yeah, he's one of my favorites, but you have to look at his fixtures. They're just really bad to start off with. I don't like the West Ham manager because he's an ex-Wolves manager who treated us like crap. So,
yeah,
kind of
rightfully
puts me off
so.
West Ham.
Yeah,
Rightfully
soggy
so.
sorrows.
Bunch of washed pups over there in Wolverhampton.
Oh, come on.
And Boma, let's talk on him next. I know we were getting all dreamy and hot and bothered about a potential Tony move to Spurs. If that materialized, I think Mboma almost becomes a must own at 7 million. He showed that he could be the singular talisman for the Bees last season in the beginning of the year when fit and Tony was out. He would be on penalties. He would be on all the set pieces, and he would really play as a kind of second striker alongside Wissa. So 7 million and Bomo, is he going to be on the watch list? Is he going to be on your radar? What to do about Evil Brian?
If even Tony leaves, then Mbomo becomes a very, very, very good option at that price, especially come game week 6.
Is that even odds or Ivan? Ivan, I like to bet on myself.
I'm gonna blame my English accent, even though he's an English player. Yeah, from game week 6, they have West Ham, Wolves, Man United, Ipswich, Fulham, Bournemouth, Leicester. That's a great run for someone who will be the striker. They'll be on penalties.
Nice.
So, yeah, but it relies on Tony leaving for me.
I think there's a world where he still has a lot of value at 7 million, given that he's still on the rise in his career. He looks like he's probably 33, same age as like Jordan Ayew, but the lad's only 24 years old, and he rocks the same sexy looking haircut that Dan does. Nice thick beard, a little less up top. That's a combination for victory right there, right, Dan?
Exactly. It gets all the ladies.
Yeah, ex hairdo like James Harden, but he keeps the hair on the beard. Let's go to Eze. I know we're all dying to talk about the Crystal Palace talisman going into this season with Olis on the way out, heading to Bayern. Eze probably is going to be on everything from bag of chips to promoted, handouts at the stadium. He's on penalties. And when he's fit, he's involved in all the goals. He had 11 goals and 5 assists in just over 2,000 minutes last season. So I really rate Eze. He is a lock in my team, unless I need to swap him for Foden. I think the only way Eze does not make my team is if I kind of shoehorn Foden into my early game week teams. So I really like the look of Eze, and I think Palace are going to be one of the surprise teams going into the new season.
Lots to like about Eze, especially his connection with Mateta up front. We'll see what the team looks like though with Elise out of it. So there's still a little bit to be discovered there, but given the price tag and being on pens, still on the rise. I think Eze's a great pick, and the fixtures are right there, plumb for the taking. And a lot of us who have that double premium setup, you're gonna want those 6.5 to 7.5 million players in your spots across your team. So he's a shoe in, and I'm just excited to actually I'm so excited for the season just to own more shares of teams outside the top half of the table. I think that's going to be so much more exciting this season to be following some of these other teams on a weekly basis and hopefully pick a few of the differentials from the bottom half.
Let's close out this section with whether we believe that Marcus Rashford can revive his career at Manchester United. He's priced at 7 million. He has had 17 goal seasons twice in the last 4 seasons, but he was a total shell of himself last year. Often was getting benched for Garnacho, which makes no sense from a footballing skill perspective. So are we in or are we completely out on Marcus?
I'm out until I see more from him. There's too many questions to be answered. 7 million is an amazing price for him if he gets the returns he did 2 seasons ago, but I just don't see it happening, at least at the beginning.
Oh man, it only seems like yesteryear where I was on vacation walking through a museum someplace abroad and was texting with Bucks, and we were just on perma bet anytime goal scorer Marcus Rashford that season. We cleaned up. I basically funded
He
that
made
whole
us so
year.
much money. I love him for that. He made
I
us and
think
the kids so much money in the UK, but he was nothing but a dummy last season.
Yeah, I think he's still got the talent. He just needs to get his confidence back, and he's such a battle with his mentality. So if he can get that right, it's a wait and see, of course. But at 7 million, I mean, the season that he popped off, he had a poor season. He was at 9 million, and they dropped him all the way down to like 6.5, and then he popped off. So we're hoping for the same thing. This could be the type of
Yo
thing
yo.
that helps really break up the template a bit, and could be if he does start to find form, you're going to want to move early. I think that's also he's a player that hits those purple patches. If you can get on him for the right 5 games, that you could really gain points on the field.
All right, next, let's go to the next section. I think that brings us to the budget friendly options of 6.5 to 5.5 million. These guys aren't quite enablers, but you'll need at least one of them, I think, if you want to have more than one premium in your side. And for me, this might be an unpopular and unpredictable opinion considering my Chelsea fandom, but I think Leon Bailey is the standout option at 6.5 million for Aston Villa. And he's going to be even more nailed than he ever has been in Unai Emery's system on the right wing, with Diaby in a shock move heading to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He had 10 goals and 11 assists in 2,000 minutes last year, and he's under 5% owned right now compared to Watkins, who's over 50% owned. For me, I definitely rather have Bailey than Watkins, but I know I'm often the contrarian, so I want to get your feedback here. Let's bring you in, Dan. Start with you.
Yeah, I like him a lot. He's looked really good in preseason too. I think 6.5 million is a great price, especially with
With
who just left.
Diaby leaving for Saudi, which was just a bizarre move. I mean, he played what
Money grab.
one season with Villa, and obviously was not the manager's choice. So they ship him off. They got a king's ransom for him though. I was quite impressed with Villa to sell him for 40 plus million pounds.
Yeah, I mean
So, like you're
Leon
saying,
Bailey. I mean he got an impressive zero point 0.9 returns per 90. So that's the best out of
ooh,
all of the 6.5 million options. So Bucks has a good point. Again, I hate to say it, but I think he's a really good shout.
Can he stay fit? That's been the big thing with Leon Bailey. Last year he was made 22 starts, looked pretty fit to me from the eye test, 21 total FPL returns. So if he could get another 20 FPL returns for 6.5 million, that would be a great investment, especially given the hopes that Villa have this season.
I would love if he was on a couple more set pieces. I know probably it's going to be McGinn and Tielemans who split that workload, but if Bailey could get a little bit more routes to goal in his locker, I think he becomes almost an auto pick. And
I mean,
right now, the auto,
we say the same thing about Watkins, but they both put up 50, 60 returns combined in open play last season.
yeah, very fair, very fair. Villa are a good team.
Attacking
They
side.
haven't, yeah, they're, and Unai Emery, I've said it many times. I think he's one of the best managers in the Premier League, let alone in world football. But Bailey right now isn't the most popular pick. I think the chalk pick right now is Chelsea's own Christopher Nkunku, who we'll talk about next, also at 6.5 million. This might be the shock price reveal of the offseason. And let's bash FPL Towers. We love doing that here on this podcast. They fucked that up, didn't they?
I mean, they based it on last season when he was injured the entire campaign, pretty much. If he can get the returns he got in the Bundesliga, where he got 30 goal involvements, then yeah, they've really
Ooh.
fucked this price up. But I haven't seen it so far from what I've seen him play. I mean, he got 2-2 in pre-season. You can look at that as a positive, or you can look at it as one of them was a penalty, which he won't take in the Premier League. I'm sorry to say it, Bucks, but I'm kind of cold on Chelsea right now after seeing pre-season, so I'm being put off a little bit from Nkunku.
Is that you winking for help? Because Cole Palmer has you in his deep freeze, his
I think
freezer.
so. I think so. I mean, 4 million cheaper than Cole Palmer is insane if Nkunku is as good as he was in the Bundesliga.
It makes you wonder if official FPL knows something maybe we don't, right? Because it sounds like, and from all the managers saying that Nkunku is going to be a really big part of this Chelsea effort this season. And I mean, he's so much cheaper than Cole Palmer. And really, neither of them have proved it other than, a hop, skip, and a jump. I'm interested. Brian, what's your take here?
I think he should have come in at 7.5 million just based on his pedigree and based on where this Chelsea team is going. Hopefully, continue to be on the rise. I mean, this guy is a world talent. I think if he can stay healthy, he had the season from hell last season. I mean, that wears on you mentally as well. In 400 minutes, he scored 3 goals. I think that he's destined for at least a dozen goals this season. A lot of the chances that fell to Jackson last year might fall to Nkunku, and he's much more clinical and just a player that is going to make this Chelsea attack not be only FC Palmer. So I'm super excited to see Nkunku in action. Can he stay healthy? That's just with some of the top assets at Chelsea. That's just the big question. Can Reece James stay healthy? Can Nkunku stay healthy? I mean, we need these guys to play 3,000 plus minutes for us to have a crack at top four. So I think for me, looking at my game week 1 squad as it stands right now, I do not have Cole Palmer, but I have Nkunku. I think it's a nice fit and punt to start the season. And if it goes wrong, the early wild card is an easy way to move him out. But they have good fixtures, and if you can't fit Palmer in, Nkunku is great way to get into that Chelsea side.
Yeah, we'll eventually have Dan do a draft so he can drop some of those breaking news nuggets on our heads. Where do we want to go next? We can go to Sosbazlai. We can talk about the Manchester City plethora of 6.5 million midfielders,
Look,
including your guy.
we don't need to talk about Soboslai. Look, he's looking good in preseason in that 8 slot, but again, they have so many players to come back. I think he's probably going to move back a little bit once all those players are back. I don't think he's the player he was in the Euros for Hungary. This is just my personal opinion. So I
Oh,
have
I
no
like it.
interest in him. Honestly,
How
all
about
of the
Grealish?
Liverpool assets, none of them interest me apart from Salah. There's just too much rotation, too much uncertainty under their new manager. I want to see some minutes. I want to see some games first.
Yeah, that's
Spicy,
fair.
Dan. Will
I
you
think the
put some
same
Nando's sauce on your fish and chips there?
that the piri piri sauce, baby. Oh, Love a cheeky Nando's. Used to eat that a lot in Australia and have had it multiple times in the UK as well. And like you said, the Manchester City mids, they're all stayaways for me. Doku, Bilva, Grealish, and our boy Rodri, all 6.5. I don't think any of them factor into our sides at the moment. If there's an injury or two in the attack and then one of these players is more nailed, then we could see some relevance there. I mean, Grealish is a player that obviously is a £100 million player. Really fell off the map last season. Mentally, will he be able to rebound? Will he be able to claim one of England's best player awards? We'll see. I think that's something that's still though not FPL relevant, but I just want Jack the Lad to be living his best life.
Yeah. And I hinted at it on the previous pod, but my personal favorite at this price range are the Nottingham Forest assets. They have the best fixture ticker for the first, what, 8, 9 game weeks. And I think the likes of Gibbs White or Hudson Odoi could get some good hauls in those games. So I'm actually really
No,
Cho,
for
liking the Nottingham
Alonga?
Forest.
Come on, throw Alonga in there too.
nah, he's
Yeah,
not going to
6 point.
start.
I think it's 6.5 for Gibbs White, and then we should say 5.5 each for Adoy and for Ilonga.
yeah, I really like Hudson Odoi. I think he's my favorite out of all of those. He's looked really good in preseason, and if you look at the end of last season, he got a lot of returns in those final few games when he was playing almost every minute. So
I
I
think the
like him a
X
lot.
the X mins between Alonga and Cho, I feel like Gibbs White's going to play 80 plus minutes where those guys could get rotated at 60, 57 minutes, that kind of thing if they're not producing. So it is definitely a punt. You would want to take Cho and rotate him with your other kind of couple cheap assets. I wouldn't want to be relying on Cho to start game week in and game week out. Whereas Gibbs White, he's going to trickle along the points and get an assist here, 5 or 6 pointer here and there. And maybe that helps you a little bit more. But if you're really strapped for funds, yeah, Cho's not bad.
Gibbs White, 5 goals, 12 assists each of the last 2 seasons. That man is settled
That's
at
hard to
his
do.
level.
That's hard to fucking do, man.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, I don't love Gibbs White, to be perfectly honest. I actually like Brennan Johnson more, 6.5 million. I was talking with friend of the pod and member of hashtag FPL USA Big Apple, aka Alex, and he was showing me that he has Brennan Johnson as a lock in his game week 1 side. He
Oh,
thinks
wow.
he's set to start at right wing, and he expects that, with Ange Ball, he's going to get lots of good chances. And he also had 5 goals and 12 assists in a little less minutes, but was averaging more goal involvements per 90 minutes. So I think my preference is to go Brennan Johnson and Adoy, as you mentioned. But I also think Alonga is kind of being forgotten about because Adoy was on this crazy, messy Lingard-esque streak where he had like 2 XG and had 8 goals or something crazy like that. And I know Jesse Lingard is famous for doing that when he was a West Ham player.
Oh, Jay Lings, what a shout out. Yeah, Gibbs White to me, he just kind of looks like Wario. I want him to grow out his mustache a bit more and really get like a frustrated face, but he really looks like Wario to me. And therefore, I'm not sure if I can own him in my side.
Dan, do we want to do a quick Wolves corner to give some love to He Chang Wang or Neto at 6.5 million each? Or are they both not on your radar just yet?
Sure. I mean, not for the first few game weeks because we have terrible fixtures, like I said on the last pod. But later in the season, around game week 9, I think a lot of us are going to have a Wolves asset. I'm hoping Neto stays at the club. I think he will because of his injury record and the price tag we want for him. So I think he will stay. So he's going to be a great asset. We also have someone who's 5.5 million, Rodrigo Gomez. He got 2 goals in preseason in the last game. He's looking really, really, really good. So no, I've got my eyes on him as an enabler later on in the season.
I love all the knowledge that you have about your hometown club. We should also just glow up Kairu Matoma and Mohamed Kudus, also both priced at 6.5 million. There will be a time and a place where those guys come onto the watch list, but I think there's enough unknowns and they're both coming back from injuries or tumultuous natures of the offseason for their clubs. So I think they'll both be interesting, but we won't be there game week 1. And I think this is a good place to jump to the 5.5 million guys because I think there are some diamonds in the rough, like CHO, like Gomez, who you mentioned. Brian, you got anyone you are hot to trot on?
Yeah, I mean, this ESR move to Fulham from Arsenal, very excited for him to get playing time, play 25 plus 100 minutes. I think he's a player when he's going to be linking up with Pereira and then Muniz. They could have a more formidable attack, and nothing against William, but how old is he? 36, 37 years old. He was old as hell. So getting some youth into that side, and it's a opportunity for him to stay in London and prove his worth. So we'll see if he can be a factor in FPL, but he's a player that I think could be one of those most underrated transfers of the season and end up on 15 to 20 returns if he can really find his groove.
Biggest ever transfer deal for Fulham for ESR, if it in fact goes across the line. One more to
Yeah,
shout out
fair.
is Semenyo of Bournemouth, also at 5.5 million. Second striker. I don't hate it, but I think it's worth going for Solanke if you're going for a Bournemouth attacker. So let's close this section out. Let's go to the deep, dark enabler pit. 5 million and below.
Into
There
the
are
abyss.
some guys in here. Yeah, into the muck, so to speak. Who's standing out from this pile of you know what?
I think there's a standout here. It's Morgan Rogers at Aston Villa. From all of the Aston Villa fans I've seen on social media, they're saying that he's pretty much guaranteed to start in that team. I mean, I don't know about that. I trust them more than myself. But if he does start at 5 million, he's looking really, really, really good. I think he'll make a nice rotation option. We were talking earlier about rotating that price point. So I think Morgan Rogers is by far the best choice here.
Yep, he's a lock in my game week one squad.
Ooh.
I think there's there's
Wow.
there's no way I don't have him based on the setup and the priority I have within my other slots. I mean, there's even a world where I have both Bailey and Morgan Rogers in my midfield, which seems a bit much, but at the 5 million mark, if this guy can start and play 2,500 minutes, he's going to be a bandwagon. You're going to want to get on it. And he finished the season strong last year as well. And I think that's not only are we evaluating him in this preseason where he's been in really good form, but in his last 10 games at Villa, he really played exceptionally. So I think there's a player there, and especially at the price point, there's nobody else that's going to come close to playing as much as he will.
So you were showing love to João Pedro on our forward pod. Is your thought that you're gonna rotate him and JP as kind of your seventh attacking option? Is that the move for your team?
Yeah, I mean, right now I want to have 13 playing outfield players in my side. Goalkeeper will be dead, and then probably a 4.0 defender. Who knows if Barco will be in a starting role for Brighton, but I think that yeah, there's definitely an opportunity to rotate between a couple of these 5 to 6 million pound players at the fringes of your team and really focus your funds elsewhere to make sure that you get in those premiums. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. And if it doesn't work out, I think with any of these picks, because we're looking at a new regime of FPL where a lot of people are going to be wild carding game week 4, game week 6, game week 8, just early wild cards and banking those transfers up. It's a very low risk move to start with somebody like Rogers. And yeah, I think it's a no brainer.
Yeah, but is it a high upside pick? And that's where I actually bring the spotlight to the next name on our rundown, which is Oscar Bob from Manchester City. And I think if he's starting the season, right, if we're saying that Foden might be phased in, KDB might be given less minutes, and there's less options in midfield, if Bob gets minutes to start the season at 5 million, oh my God, he could smash Rogers right out of the International Space Station.
Oscar fucking Bob. Two first names, always a crowd pleaser. That's all I got to add there.
All right. That's we're
Yeah,
not going to spend too much time
I'm
here.
not with you on this one, Bucks. Finally,
All
I
right, good.
disagree with you.
Back
Finally.
back to the universe is back in balance as we like to have it. Let's go through three of the standout options at 4.5 million just to wrap this up. I think Harry Winks from Leicester. He was a mainstay of their campaign in the championship. He's nailed to start for that side. Lucas Bergvall at Spurs, 4.5 million was
Bergvall.
He was an interesting signing. I don't know where he's going to slot in. He's probably contingent on there being injuries in that team. Then he might get his chance. And then Jesurun Raksaki at Crystal Palace, 4.5 million,
What a
attacking
name.
winger. Yeah, strong name. He would
Very
be on
strong.
like the all college football team name with that get up on the back of his jersey.
Sock'em Raksaki. Wow.
I'll be honest, I've never heard of this guy. I don't know where you've pulled him from.
He's been
depths.
smashing it in preseason. He has. That's my job, guys. I'm the in the weeds research arm of this podcast.
Yeah,
don't you know?
Oh, don't you know? Sock'em Raksaki. Wow. Okay. All right. That's might be a team name right there.
All
I
right.
mean, these guys are going to come into your side and get you 2 fucking points. So, I think there's much bigger upside with just spending 0.5 more and starting with Rodgers and seeing if anybody else emerges. But there's no reason that you can't make concessions elsewhere and not get Rodgers as your 5th midfielder.
All right. I like that. Words of wisdom. Let's throw out the dirty sock and let's get out of here. Brian, tell the listeners where they can find us on social. And Dan, maybe you want to remind the listeners about our free to enter mini league that has a kit delivered to the overall winner, as well as some weekly shout outs on this humble podcast.
I mean, Bucks, my socks are clean. I don't know about you. I know you got 2 little kids at the house, so you got some more dirty socks laying around, but
laundry is the worst as a dad. That is by far the worst chore. I will totally agree to that. Worst chore.
That's certainly not what I was alluding to, but let's keep it moving.
You sick fuck. Dan?
Yeah, so we have a free global press play pod premiership league. That's quite a mouthful, Bucks, I have to say. You can win a Premier League shirt.
You love it. You love it. Don't act like you don't
threat.
love the extra big mouthfuls on OnlyFans.
Oh, wow. There we go.
We got to get out of here. This is getting out of hand.
But yes, you can win a Premier League shirt of your choice. You can use code T88F87 to join. And you have to be following at FPL USA Press Play on X in order to qualify for that prize.
Love it. Get involved.
And you should be following the 3 hosts because we're awesome. I'm at FPL USA Bucks. Brian is at FPL USA Brian. And Dan, the rogue agent himself from the UK, at FPL _Black Wolf. Oh, let's howl at the moon and GTFO. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back with our defender and goalkeeper rundown soon enough.
Oh my God, I love defenders. I can't fucking wait for this next pod. See you soon, boys.
Great vibes. Great vibes. Strong
ending
vibes
there.